Good. So as I've said before, a lot of things to cover today. I want to break the talk into two parts. So first, we'll talk about React in general. Um, we will discuss how it works, how you write code with React, what are some of the common things everybody should be aware of. Um, I think yeah, okay, this will be actually second part. First, I want to talk about what it is, how it works, why it was created, sort of give you an introduction to this. Yeah, good. So React. First thing to understand, many people think that React will magically just make you a great developer and it will just all of your websites will be awesome right away. So I think it makes sense to say that that's not the case. Yeah. So as everything with web development, you have to have good base knowledge for HTML, CSS, and plain JavaScript basically. As long as you know that, React can do a couple of things for you. So it can make your website look very responsive. So obviously it's for making single page applications. So that's one good thing. I'm like I'm not saying you can do that in a different way. So for example, a great developer might be able to just use jQuery and create single page application, which would be awesome, and you wouldn't be able to say if it's React or not. But React definitely make things easier for you. Yeah? So that's the most important thing for me to understand, that React make things easier, and one of the ways it makes it easier by is um, it modularize everything. So one thing you'll need to learn when you start using this framework a lot is you look at the website. So for example, this is the website for the thing that we are using to record the screen, and you look at the website and you should start see components and you should start see structure in it. Yeah. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'll print screen this and just copy it here, and immediately when you start thinking React, you should be able to just look at something like this and you go sec. Can I set opacity somewhere? Maybe not. Let's do just outline. Okay, and let's do right. So you'll see, for example, this, and you say like, this is one component. Yeah, this will be navbar component. Then, for example, this can be like navbar. Let's use different color. This will be like navbar my account component, for example, or my account component. You can place it anywhere. It doesn't have to be in navbar, and you should create your components, if possible, in a way that you can always place them anywhere. Yeah. Then this will be some sort of tab component, yeah, which will be probably this big, and it will consist of like a tab, which will have some sort of header component, and everything, like modularize it to as low level as possible, and that way you realize that creating a website is actually very easy, because you don't have to worry about the big things. You just take like, okay, I'll create a navbar. When navbar is done, I'll move to another thing, and this way, one after another, you will be able to create something pretty great without sort of worrying too much about how one thing will work with another and how exactly should it bind together, because it's a module. If later on we decide we want to have the navbar maybe at the bottom, or you have a crazy idea, do something, it will probably require some work, but if you structured it correctly, hopefully it shouldn't be so difficult to achieve something like that. Yeah. Uh, Good. So this is React. Uh, Another thing to understand about React is it's a view layer. Yeah. So if you have like MVC, model view controller. This is the view. So the way to think about React component is think of it as a computer monitor, for example, computer display. You plug a cable in, and it will display something that's coming to it. Yeah. So you inject some properties, and it will give you some visual. Yeah. So that's in general component. Obviously, it can have some sort of state, and you can manipulate the user interface of the component in a way, like if you, I don't know, if you move your cursor on your screen on your monitor, it's still a monitor component, but it was built in a way that you have some sort of you can interact with it. But the most basic principle is just you give it something and it spits out some HTML. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. One other way that I from time to time think about React is, so let's look at some example React codes. Anything. I think all of you have a certain understanding of how React looks, at least just a bit. So let's look at some code. I'm just can be anything really. I just want to okay, footer, for example. Good. So this is a React component footer of some sort. I don't know where I went. You know, this is some sort of to-do list. Some example somebody created, and we have a footer component. So on a website, the footer will be something that's at the bottom. So the footer will be this, and it will contain some sort of HTML, and that's exactly what it does. Yeah. So when you have a footer, it will return the render method of this component will return some HTML. So in a way, when you see a code in React, you will see a mix of HTML elements and React components, and it can motivate you to think of React components as some sort of smart, special HTML components, you know, or HTML tags, yeah, because you write it the same way. Plus, it has a very similar way of being represented on the screen. So think of it as somebody long time ago said, like, we will have a footer HTML tag which will render somehow, or we will have an image HTML tag which will render somehow. Image will accept property source, yeah, and that source will be a path to an image that it can actually display, yeah. And same way with React, you just define how something works, and then you can just use it and you can reuse it, yeah? So doesn't matter if you create a component image in React, it can accept anything you want. It can accept padding, it can accept path to an image, and at the end of the day, it will just render some HTML. Yeah. Good. Now let's start writing some code. I think just so that you see. Good. So I mentioned yesterday when we started working about talking about this new project that we are going to use ECMAScript 6, we are going to use JSX, and we are going to use TypeScript. Yeah. But what I don't want to do is people, when they are exposed to too many new technologies at the same time, somebody can become a bit confused about, okay, what is this? Why am I writing this? Is it ECMAScript 6? Is it TypeScript? Is it React? Is it JSX? You know, it's kind of hard for you to realize what's what in the beginning. So the first examples I want to show you is just use React with plain JavaScript, so that you are not distracted by anything. You know, you'll just see how it works, the bare bones. So only the library and JavaScript. Yeah. So we will be doing our work in JS Fiddle. It's kind of useful. Some of you, for example, I've been discussing this with Izzy in the morning, and it's something that might be worth talking about. So somebody will be very motivated to like create your own solution. You know, like for example, Izzy created index HTML, and he wanted to use like all the libraries from CDN and just see it working in Chrome like a proper application. That's great. You know, you can do that if that's the way you prefer working with it. That's fine. The reason why I'm using Fiddle is I can share it with you easily. We can collaborate on it. If you don't understand something, you can send me the link to the Fiddle. You say like, I don't understand fifth line. Why did you do this? You can add a comment there. You can save it. I can get your revision. It's very neat. Yeah. Plus all of the things that you are going to see now, you can find them on my public fiddles. So if you go to this link, I'm copying it for everybody to see. So this is all we have so far. You can see all of them there. Yeah. But at the moment we want to start fresh, because I think if I just show you some code, it will be harder to follow and understand why I did it that way. Good. So as with everything, we have some configuration to do. So we will need to add some libraries to JS Fiddle so that it works. So first of all, we need the JS Fiddle integration with Babel for this. Actually, we don't need Babel for the plain JavaScript, but let's keep it there anyways. And we will need at least one div with an ID of, I don't know, app, doesn't matter, which will be the thing where we render our application into. Yeah, similar with Angular, React, Angular 2. You know, all of these single-page application tends to work in a way that you render your things into one DOM element. So let's have this DOM element and let's call it div. Then we will need to make the fiddle work. We need to add some external resources. So one will be React with add-on. As just, I'm not going to comment on this. This is just things that you need to have to make it work in JS Fiddle. You can find it somewhere. I don't know. I found it somewhere. Good. And now I think we should be set. And we want JavaScript 1.7 for this, if I remember correctly. Yeah, good. JavaScript 7. Now we are going to create a component, okay? So first, plain JavaScript, no ECMAScript, no TypeScript, nothing. So we'll create a component hello, and the way to create it with plain JavaScript is just call the library. So the main API is React. If you go dot, you are exposed to the API of React, and the way to create a class now would be to call create class method, and we need brackets around it. If you are not using JSX, which I'll explain what is later, you'll need to provide display name for this, and the display name will be something that will be used while debugging. Yeah. So this way you tell the debugger the name of your component, if I understand it correctly. I think that should be the case. So now we've created the basic class, basic React class, basic component, and the React class is an abstract class, so it contains some methods. There's like 10 or 12 of them. We'll go over it, but the least you have to include to make it work is the render function. So render is the thing that is called when you want to display the element, because as I've said, it's a view layer. view layer. So the visual is all this is about. Yeah? And all the render method does is it returns some HTML. Okay. So now, since we are doing this in plain JavaScript, we just want to create some sort of HTML with JavaScript, which is pretty standard. So we can create it with React even. We can go create element. It will be a div. This is second parameter, I think is ID maybe, or style, I don't know. But the third parameter is inner HTML, and second parameter will be concatenated to that. So we want to add a name from the properties. So every component in React.
You are missing E in create.
Thank you. Um, every component in React has a state and properties. Properties, just to explain it very quickly, properties is something that you can pass into a component. So this is the data cable to the monitor that I was talking about before, and the state is something that the component maintains itself. Yeah. So that would be like the position of the cursor on the screen. Yeah. So with this, I uh, I was querying the properties, and I want the name property. Yeah, this is not yet defined, but don't worry about it. We haven't used this component yet, and that's what we are going to do now. Yeah. So in order React, another very good thing about it is it's unopinionated of where or how you want to use the output of it. So you can render it, for example, to a string. You can render it to DOM. You can render it to a lot of other places. Usually for a website, you will render to DOM. Yeah. So that's what I've been talking about before. So we want to render this component into this div. Yeah. But the thing to keep in mind, you can render to screen, you can render to string, you can render to DOM, you can maybe find some different cool ways of using your React code as well. So now we'll use the DOM library. So this is another one. So we've included React. It was the first one. Then we included React DOM. It's the one that we are going to use now. We have browser as well, which is, I believe, the Babel compiler, which again we don't need for this one, but we will move to ECMAScript 6 very quickly. So that's where it will make sense to have that there. And React DOM has a method render, and it accepts two parameters. So first parameter will be what we are going to render. So let's do it with, again, plain JavaScript, no JSX. So create element. We are going to create element hello. Yeah, so this is the variable we've created here, and now we are passing it inside this create element method. And the second parameter will be the properties we are passing into this. And now this is where we do the property initialization. So this is how we pass the properties into this element. Yeah. So now when I render this, the hello element will get an object properties, and one part of that object will be named world. If I wanted to pass in something else, hello. Yeah. So it's a JavaScript object. You can pass in anything you want. You can pass in array. You can pass in strings, dates, whatever. Yeah. Second parameter to React DOM.render will be the HTML document, HTML element to which we are going to render this. Okay, it's going to be document dot. We want to render this into a div called app. Good. Now if I run this, okay, it complained about something, but it worked. So not exactly sure why. Let's run it again. Doesn't really matter as long as it works. So you'll see that we have the hello, and then we have the thing that we passed into it with the property name. Yeah. So this is how you. This is plain JavaScript, plain React, the simplest example that you have. Yeah? Anything you see more than this will be something that we add to it eventually. Yeah? So now let's change this and let's make it in an ECMAScript 6 way. So this will be a chance for you to understand what's the different. Or actually no, let's do JSX first. That makes more sense. Good. So this is something that can be a bit confusing at first for people who start using React. See, usually in MVC we've been used to separating everything. So you have HTML in one file, CSS in another file, and JavaScript in another file, which is fine. Yeah, that's the way it worked before, and that's cool. But React is changing this a bit, and the way it works here is they create the HTML with JavaScript. Okay, so if you wanted, you wouldn't have to use JSX at all, yeah, because you can create any HTML you want with just plain JavaScript. But the thing is, it's kind of complicated to do it. Like this is not very human readable, you know. All this does is something like a div, which will have hello and then something. Yeah? So in our case, it will be hello world, but in this case, it will be like the name that comes from the properties. While this is very readable and very understandable, this is not. Yeah? And especially if the page becomes complicated, like if you take a look at source code of some navigation bar or something like that, it's a huge HTML which has a lot of levels, and it will be very hard to read. So this is why the people in Facebook thought it would be good to simplify creating HTML with JavaScript somehow, and they came up with JSX. Yeah. So JSX is a way to write HTML with JavaScript very neatly. Yeah. So how it looks? It looks just like HTML. Yeah. So remember, I'm still in JavaScript class or function or whatever, and what I can do is I can just write div like this. When I run it, complain about this. When I run it, it will say hello. Change something, it will say hello too. You can add classes, IDs to it, anything, and it will just work. Don't get this confused with HTML. It's not HTML, it just looks like HTML. Yeah. The compiler will take this and it will create something that is much less comprehensible. It will generate something very similar to what we had before, but it will end up being JavaScript anyways. This is just an easier way to write it. Good. And since it's JavaScript, we can use JavaScript variables, and the way to use JavaScript variables in JSX is to surround it with curly braces, and then you can do something like this, props name. Yeah? When I now compile this, it will become hello world, yeah? Because the name is passed in from here. So we've modified our component to be built with plain JavaScript and JSX. Now let's do the same for this line as well. So instead of having to do React create element, I can just do hello, and I can just go world. Okay. And now maybe the thing I've said before makes a bit more sense, because now you see that we write these JSX files when we use components in them. We write it in the same way as we would if it was HTML tag. Yeah. So this is why I've said like it's like you can sort of think of it as a fancy HTML tag basically, to which you can pass in properties and do some cool things with it. Good. So now we have an example, plain JavaScript and JSX. Now let's add some ECMAScript to this to again understand what's the benefit of doing that and how it changed what we are seeing. So one of the things that's been missing from JavaScript for a while was idea of classes, uh, constructors, stuff like this. Really, people who came from the strongly typed community like C Sharp, C++, they've been they've been used to working in a certain way, and that way, in my opinion, is good. The structure of like an object-oriented classes is much neater than the modules we used to fake this in JavaScript with. So then they've created a new version of JavaScript. They called it ECMAScript, which is just a new version of JavaScript, so don't get confused with that. And now the way to achieve the same as we did. So remember, we are not doing anything new. We are just rewriting this with ECMAScript 6. Okay? So the way to do that will be class. Yeah. So it's already starting to look a bit more familiar for people maybe who have some C Sharp experience. And then we go extends, which is basically something like inheritance, if you want. And you go React dot component, which is an abstract class. Yeah. We don't need this. We need only curly braces around this. And as I've said before, display name is sort of handled automatically when you use JSX, so we don't need this anymore. And since we are in ECMAScript now, we can just remove this and call it like this. Yeah. So same thing we had written before becomes a bit more natural for people who came from, as I've said, like object-oriented, managed code, C++, C Sharp, and there's some cool things that you can do with this. I think it really makes things easier, so that's why I've chosen to use this for our project. And hopefully, if I didn't break anything, it should still work. Yeah. So as I'm saying, we are, and again, the same thing as I've said before about React. Like ECMAScript isn't here for you to guarantee that your code will be better. Is here just for people who know how to write good code and for them to make their work more efficient and easier to read at times. Yeah. So uh, now we have ECMAScript 6. Yeah. And now to make this like the chain of events, so we started with plain, then added JavaScript, then added ECMAScript. Now I want to finish this by adding TypeScript, but I didn't manage to make it work in JS Fiddle, so you're just gonna have to take my word for it that it works, and I'll just show you how to write it and what are the benefits of doing that. So like JavaScript is cool, you can do plenty of great stuff with it. But one of the things that I don't like, and this is especially true when you are developing, because TypeScript is only for developers. Yeah, it's this will make no effect on the code that you end up with whatsoever. it will compile to exactly the same JavaScript code as if you wouldn't use TypeScript, but it will make it easier for you to create your applications. Yeah. So the way it will make it easier is, so let's say we call this, so we have this property and we call it name. Yeah. And let's say I messed up and make a mistake, and instead of name I called it name here. Yeah. Which if you have a big file and you don't spot it right away, then you have to run this. It will obviously not output it, so you have to look at your console, run it again. It will not complain in this case, which is exactly what I wanted to show you, because why it's not complaining? This is null. So what it will do, it will just add null. Yeah? So it doesn't even give you like an error message in this case. Sometimes it does, sometimes the error message is easy to read, sometimes it's hard. But the bottom line is, you can make mistakes that are sort of hard to fix. And obviously the fix here was simple, but sometimes it isn't. With TypeScript, it will be very similar to when you are writing, for example, C#. In Visual Studio, you have IntelliSense, and when you write dot, it will literally give you like list of things that you can add there, and you cannot put anything else there. Yeah. So basically, if I go like name again, it will give you like red scribbly lines, and it will tell you there is no property like this defined. Yeah. That's very cool, because thanks to that, you can spot your mistakes right away, and it will save you valuable time debugging, figuring out what the hell is going on and why I don't see my world here, even though everything seems to be working correctly. Yeah. So the way to write TypeScript is it's actually very similar to what we have already, but in order to have this type safety, we need to tell it what the properties are and what the state is as well. So as I've said, we have two things. We have properties and we have state. So just like this, we have a state as well, which again is a JavaScript object. Yeah, and state can be set inside the element. So if, for example, I do this set state name equals test. Maybe it's a better idea. Another thing that that ECMAScript 6 gives you is a constructor, which is useful. And what you can do here is you can just set the state like this, and I'm forgetting about something. It still has the name here. That's strange. Just a sec. This is the constructor of the abstract class, which we, I think, need to call. Okay. Okay, now it works. It was a S missing in constructor. Okay. Again, this is why I want to use TypeScript, because maybe I'm not the best typist, and maybe something like this can happen. And as you've seen, like, cannot read property name of now, and then something complaining about the constructor and supper in it. But took me a while to figure out what was going on. So TypeScript is a good idea, trust me. Now, all I wanted to do with this is I just wanted to show you that there is a state and there is props, and state is set inside the element and props is passed into it from outside. Yeah. Now, in order in TypeScript to have some sort of type safety around this, let's call this last name. Make it look better. So in order to define these so that the compiler and your Visual Studio or VS Code or whatever you are writing this with knows what is the only things that can be there, you need to, in TypeScript, you need to define an interface, and let's call the first one hello props. Yeah. So in this interface we will be defining the properties of the hello component, and the properties, as you remember, we have only one at the moment, and it's a name. And then you go like this and you say that it's a string. Yeah. So this way it will understand and it will know that this property here will be called name, and it will be of type string, nothing else. Yeah. So nothing else can go there, and it has to go here. Yeah. So TypeScript will also complain if I would do something like this. It will tell me, okay, but you made a mistake, you didn't provide the property, and this component actually need the property. Yeah. Sometimes you don't want it to be there all the time, so you go a thing like this to make it optional. Yeah. But it's not the case now, so we can leave it like this. And for the state, we need to do the same thing. So hello state, and for state we have last name, which is also a string in our case. It can be a boolean, it can be integer, it can be actually a number in TypeScript, not integer, all sorts of things. But the important part is you want to define this. If for any reason you don't want it to be an exact type, you can say any, and then it will accept anything, but it will have to be provided. It will have to be there. Yeah. Let's make it string, and the component, when you are creating it, needs to know about these things somehow. So the way you do it, similar to C# again, if you ever seen generics, you will just pass in the props and the state. Yeah. So this way, as I've said, this won't work because I didn't manage to make TypeScript work in JS Fiddle. But this way, if we've been in Visual Studio, you would see that if I go props.name, it will give me the IntelliSense for this. If I go state dot something, it will give me that there's only one option currently, last name. Actually, I can show you how it works. I have the project we are going to work on here, and for example here, when I go this dot props, and see, already this is TypeScript. Yeah, you know what is there. We have props, we have state. Yeah, we have some other things, don't worry about it yet. And then when I go props, I see we have three things here. Yeah, doesn't matter that you have no idea now what they mean, but we have three things, nothing else. If I go blah blah blah, it will complain. There is no blah 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 on the counter state. And just like I've showed you here in the JS Fiddle, show you again. So this is the generic parameters. So here I've defined the counter props, and the counter props just come from somewhere and they are defined. Yeah, perfect. So now we have TypeScript. It's great, we'll use it, but in order to do some live coding, I want to continue using JS Fiddle. So I'll just use ECMAScript 6 and we'll pretend we have type safety. Yeah. So we'll have to help me from time to time if I make any mistakes. So we have this component. Let's make sure it works again. Great. And now I want to start showing you what are some of the advanced things you can do with React and how you can achieve them. So what we have at the moment is a pretty dumb component that just accepts some string and renders something with a string in it. Yeah. Let's say we want to do something more, something nicer, something more useful. So let's say, for example, along with the message that comes from outside, we want to display what time is it again after it. Yeah. So in order to do that, we will use state, and we will include a new state variable, which will be, let's call it current time, and the default value for this will be new date. Yeah? So this is a way in JavaScript how you can just get the current date and time. Yeah? And we want to render this somehow. So I want to create a new div here, and I want to just render this state dot current time dot to string. So if I didn't make any mistake, okay. Now we have the time. Yeah. But this, in all its simplicity, is I think still too simple to actually show you how powerful and neat React is. So let's make it tick. Let's make it update every second. Yeah. So in order to do that, it's a good idea now to introduce some of the abstract methods that are contained in this React.component class. There's quite a few of them, but their purpose is very easy every time, so it will be equally as easy to understand what they do. So we have constructor is kind of important because in constructor you can set initial state, you can do some initial Ajax calls, maybe stuff like that. But that's pretty usually like this is ECMAScript 6. Yeah? So every class has a constructor, and you can call it, and you can set up the properties of the class with it. It can actually, this constructor in fact accepts the properties, and then you pass the properties into the super, which is like the constructor of the base class, and you can do something with the properties. Yeah? Then first base class or first abstract method that I want to talk about in this base abstract class is component will mount. Yeah? Now to mount something in web development jargon means that something is being added somewhere. Yeah. So that's exactly when this method fires. So if you define this method will fire before the component is rendered, before the component is added for the first time. Yeah. So when I do console log and go like this, remove these guys, you see that it tells me component will mount. Yeah. So you can do things that you want to do before component mounts. It's quite usual to do stuff like add handlers at this point in time. Yeah. So if you need to handle scroll, resize, anything like that, you can add it here. Yeah. Good. Then we have another one, which is component did mount, and this happens right after the previous one. So, and it does exactly what it says. So it just fires after the component mounts. Yeah? when I run this, you'll see now that first component will mount and then component did mount. Good. Then we have another one, and another one is component will receive properties. Now, one of the neat things about React is that I didn't mention yet is every time you change this property, so React works with virtual DOM. Yeah. So we'll have a DOM, which is the representation of the website in the browser, and that's been here forever. That's been here for 20 more than 20 years, let's say. And one of the things it doesn't do very well is it's very slow. Yeah. So if you want to change many things, update big list, big table, it's very slow to do these things with DOM. So in React, they figured that it would be a good idea to create an exact clone of DOM, but keep it in memory and do it with JavaScript, because JavaScript can actually do things very quickly. Yeah, and thanks to that, uh, every time we change the property that we pass into a component, or every time anything happens, it can actually re-render the whole application, and it happens very quickly. So it will just re-render in memory and then just swap in one operation the whole DOM for the new one. Yeah. So that first of all makes it very fast, very efficient, even from the resources point of view. So chances are that your application, for example, on mobile, can consume less battery if you do it with technology like this, and it will re-render the application automatically. So you don't have to worry about like, okay, the name updated to something else. Now I need to find the place where I use it and update it myself. No, React will do this for you. Yeah. So the abstract method that fires before you do this is called component will receive properties, and it accepts one parameters, which is the next properties. Yeah. So if you want, you can do some stuff with it. Yeah. You can check what it is. For example, I can do this, and I can display them. Yeah. So now, yeah, okay. Now obviously it doesn't fire because when it receives them for the first time, it doesn't fire. Yeah. But when we change them later on, we'll come up with a better way of doing this. And when we change them, you'll see that it's firing. Actually, let's do that now. So let's make the clock tick in this. So let's do set interval. Set interval is a typical JavaScript function, so it doesn't need any explanation. It accepts function where you can do something, and it accepts the time interval. So let's say we want to fire this every second, and let's say we want to set state. So this is the method which you have to use every time you want to change your state. Yeah. And let's do set current time to the actual current time. Okay. Now, when I run this, it will not work right away. And the reason why it not work is since this is fired later, sometime, in a second after this component was created, this is not set for us anymore. This is how JavaScript works. Yeah? So if I console log this here, you'll see that this is actually a window now, while I'm expecting this to be the component itself. Yeah. makes sense. It's this is something that can be a bit confusing in the beginning, but it makes sense because this is how JavaScript works. Every time you have something that fires later on, like an async callback, this will be set to the thing that is currently this, not the thing that was this when you initialized the callback. Yeah. So the way to solve this is you just go bind this. So this way, this will be this. Good. So now, if I fire this again, you'll see that the clock ticks, and we have a React component that actually is doing something, and it's re-rendering itself automatically, which is kind of cool. Um, it can do it very quickly, as I've said before, plus very efficiently as well. Okay, so we are happy. And another thing that we will do now is, since we want to see how it works with the will receive props and some more things, I will actually create a new component, and we will be passing these properties into that one. Yeah. So let's create a component called time renderer, and this one will also extend React component, and it will have, as everything, it will have a render method which will do, which will return div, and it will render this dot props dot current time to string. Finish the div. Okay, and now we need to pass this into our new component. So instead of rendering this directly, we will just use JSX magic, and we will just call time renderer and pass current time into it, which will be this state current time. Okay, so does it make sense what I've did just now? Instead of rendering it directly from the state inside the main component, I've created a new component, pass the property into the new component, and I'm rendering the new one, which renders the actual HTML for the time. Okay, so everybody at peace with it?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, good. So now when I do this again, I probably made some mistakes, so let's see what's the mistake. Okay, there is no closing tag, so I just forgot to close this. Okay, and now it works, and it's displaying time. It looks almost the same, but the good thing about this is we've added some more structure into it. So now we have hello component, and we have chosen that the hello component is actually using the time renderer component, which is responsible for rendering the time. Perfect. Now let's move these methods into the new component, because that way it will be easier for us to see what's being fired and how. And let's run it one more time. And now you see component will mount, component did mount, and we are console logging something. Wait a sec. Is it this? Ah, it's in the timer, isn't it? Yeah, because this we need here. Okay, and we don't need to console log this anymore, because we made our peace with the fact that we need to bind this, And here we just want to console log component will mount. Good. Now let's fire this one more time. Okay, component will mount, component did mount, perfect. Now the reason why I did it is to show you how this thing works. So every time we are about to receive new properties, this method will be fired, and this is a chance for you to react to that. Yeah. So see, component will receive props 3, 4, 5, 6. So every second this method fires. So you can do something with the new properties. You can react to them somehow. You can maybe trigger some new action, do something with it. And it's quite useful again, as all of these, to be honest. Then there's another one, which is called should component update. Yeah. So I told you every React component re-renders itself automatically every time anything changes. Yeah. And this thing here is a chance to disable that behavior. So this function returns true or false. Okay. And if it returns false, it will not update. And if it returns true, it will update. Good. So now I return false, and you see nothing is changing anymore, even though we are receiving the props, because we can see it here. So 10, 11, 12, every second new props come in, but we get to should component update, and we decide not to update. Now, you might ask if it is useful, not useful at all, very useful. It depends, you know. Most of the times you shouldn't touch this, because most of the time React should be smart enough to figure out on its own if it should update or not. Yeah. But from time to time, so let's say I made this timer fire every 1 second, yeah, 1000 milliseconds. But let's say for some reason I have a timer that fires every 10 milliseconds, so 100 times every second, and I do this, and I return true every time. So what it will do is it will update this 100 times a second. Yeah. So even like you see how quickly it goes. So it fires 100 actions every second, updates everything. It's fast, it's efficient, but you shouldn't overdo it. So if you have a case like this and you cannot affect the input, you should think about maybe doing something with it in the should component update. And I don't want to waste too much time with this, so I'll just copy what I've prepared before. So basically what you can do here is you can check the, I think I've named it current time here. So you can only update if the seconds, because seconds is the only thing that is changing here. So you can only update if the seconds is different from the previous seconds. Yeah. So the way to do that is if previous props, that's the property that's the parameter that comes to this method, time get seconds equal this props current time dot get seconds. We are not going to re-render, and we will return false. Otherwise, we will re-render. Yeah. So this way, even though we get seconds previous props. This. So even though, okay, let's make it fire every 500 milliseconds, which is still redundant, but a bit easier to read. So even though we fired the component will receive props, so now it was 55 and 54, so it re-rendered, and now it was 55 and 55, so it did not re-render. Yeah. If I put a console log here as well, we can call it rendered. Yeah. So now when we look at it, you'll see that if the seconds actually updated, it will render, and if it didn't update, it will not render. Yeah. So you can save some valuable time doing this. Okay. This is quite a lot of output, so let's clear it so we don't need this anymore. And we can fire this only every 1 second. I'm pretty happy with that. Good. So now we see how it changes. Actually, we don't need this. Okay. Neat. So now we only see that component will receive props. Fine. And there's a few more methods, and I think it's been an hour, so I just want to make this quick. So I'll just copy them all and just explain what they do. So first, component will update. Very simple. It fires before the component actually updates. Component did update fires right after that, and component will unmount happens before you stop using the component. So if in this example I made some sort of condition that, for example, this uh, component will only appear on the screen if we, I don't know, if the date is even or whatever, you know, you can think of any condition that comes to mind. Every time it will disappear from the page, this will fire, and then every time it appears again, will mount will fire, did mount will fire, and so on, just like we've seen it before. So basically, if I run it again now, you'll see the whole thing. So component will mount, did mount, receive props, will update, did update, finished. Yeah. So that's the way you work with React, and all of these things are important, and there's really not so many of them. So I think it's quite easy to understand what they do and how they do it. The only complicated thing is to know which use and when. Yeah. So you'll just have to practice a bit to become confident with this stuff. Awesome. I think that's done. That's it. It's been a first proper session on React. Hope it didn't hurt. It was quite a lot to take for me, to be honest. Okay, so now, question, if any. And if you have any, then all of them.
I think I'll probably start asking the questions when I start doing it for myself. I think it's a bit clearer whether I understand it or not then. And I'll probably come back to you.
Yeah, it makes
I
sense.
think we need to try it because now it was very quick for me.
For me too.
But I think if we need to start using it, it will be more clearer. I can
Yeah.
understand the concept and everything, but we need to try it ourselves.
Okay, that makes sense. I think that's fair enough.
The beginning, the first half of hour was good, but then with all of the did mount, will update, and stuff, yeah.
Don't let it confuse you. It's very simple. It's just a couple of methods that fire automatically when something happens.
Yeah, I understand the concept, just
Yeah.
just that are a bit unclear to me right now.
Actually, compared to many other frameworks, this is really, really easy, because now, based on this, so it took like an hour for me, and I've more or less explained everything. Like with the knowledge I provided now, I think you should be able to create like quite great things, to be honest. Yeah, because we still didn't touch how you handle data and how you handle stores and like where what should have a state and what should have props injected to it, which we will do later. But I think this is already something that can give you a pretty good starting point for a proper web application that can be single page, and it's fast, it's responsive, so, and it's still I think it's not so much, you know. Like I spoke with some people about this, and they've been like, "Oh, React is complicated. It takes a while to set up everything." Well, I don't think so. You know, it's really it's doing great things for you in the background, and you don't have to worry too much about it. You just need to learn how to create a component, basically. So that's already quite good. But I understand you need some time to grasp it and probably play with it, create some components for yourself, and see how it works. Yeah. So let's wrap it up. It's been great. It's been lovely to have you as the audience for this, and I hope it was helpful. And we'll talk a bit more. So my initial plan was to continue and start talking about how to handle data with React today. Now I'm sort of thinking that maybe, like, how do you feel? Do you need much more time to digest this, or can we maybe have a meeting today and discuss some more things? I'll leave it up to you.
I think we need to practice, so I don't know if to have another meeting, I think we should practice a little bit and after to see how is our progress.
You'll
What do you
practice
think?
enough when we do the project. You know,
Yeah.
that's the important thing, because better, or now everybody will just go and will try your things, maybe JS Fiddle, maybe you'll create some application of your own, but the main thing is the sooner we start doing the actual application, the sooner you will learn it properly. Yeah. So okay, fair enough. Let's do the meeting tomorrow. Yeah, the same time. For you to have some time to play with this. This is the first time you've seen React properly, so maybe you'll need some time to, I don't know, have a look around, see how it works, and tomorrow we'll start with Flux and with Redux. Yeah, so these are the frameworks that handles data in these applications. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In the
Okay.
meantime, today, while you are working with this, let me know if you have any problems, if you have any questions, like anytime. At the moment, I don't have too many other things that I need to take care of. Yeah, so most of the stuff it's been picked up by Steven that I usually do. So especially for the first week, I should be able to like get you up to speed. Just help you make sure everything is working well for you. Good.
Okay, so if you can send us the video, because my screen was freezing, so sometimes when you were speaking about stuff and doing it, I didn't see it, so this was a problem for
Okay,
me.
sure. I'll upload it to my
Just
Google
keep
Drive.
it, because it will be big. You could stop it like 10 minutes.
I'll upload it to Google Drive. I think it should be fine. We'll see how big it is anyways. Okay?